For more, I am joined by Tina Brown. She is a CBS News Royals contributor, as well as the author of the Diana Chronicles. Tina, welcome. It's great to have you with us. You have covered the British monarchy for years. So what is your personal reaction to this news?
Tremendous sadness. It truly is the end of an era. He was a magnificent man of the greatest generation. His idea and concept of service was really forged during World War II and meant everything to him. And yet he managed to carry out those duties with such kind of flair and self-possession. He was never, ever a handbag carrier for the Queen, even though he walked 5 paces behind her and he was very aware of being the backup to the Queen. He always maintained his own tremendous presence, his own great dignity, and his manly understanding of what monarchy means. And it was a really remarkable thing to see as the years went by, because he was a very red-blooded individual. And for him to kind of be able to subsume himself into service in the way that he did for over 70 years is really extraordinary. And I think he will be more and more appreciated, actually, as the years go by.
He did wear his role extremely well. We, of course, only knew him as the Duke of Edinburgh and only really saw Prince Philip in the public light. But who was he behind closed doors amongst his close friends and his wife, Queen Elizabeth?
Well, he was a tremendously mixed man, actually, in the sense that, although he had a great sort of barking, sort of gruff in many ways, imperious in other ways, demeanor, he was also just a very well-versed in so many things, passionate reader of history, spoke 4 or 5 languages. He was raised all over the world, all over Europe, because of being displaced when his father, the relative of the King of Greece, was displaced and thrown out of Greece. The family had to kind of wander Europe without any actual place to be. So he had this very interesting, disrupted childhood. And it left him with this sort of outsider temperament that always made him ask questions. And the great role that he really performed for the Queen was that he always gave her such honest answers. I mean, she knew in Philip she had this absolutely straight arrow, ramrod straight truth teller, who was the one person she could turn to and say, what do you think of that? Should I do this? How was this? Did I do this right? Should I do this? He was her sounding board on everything, really. And yet he managed to do that without sort of meddling in her constitutional role. He never, did inappropriate meddling in her relationships with Downing Street, with her role, her affairs of state. He kept himself right out of that. But she gave him a great many other responsibilities, which then were his domain. In many ways, it was like very much a traditional marriage, in the sense that, one of her friends said to me, you could break it down this way. He ran the shooting and she brought the picnic. And that sort of was the way she and he worked as a couple. She gave him oversight of all of her estates and palaces. He was absolutely in charge of the Balmoral, Sandringham, Windsor Castle, everything that happened on those estates. He ran those estates like a German junker, it was said. And he also made a lot of the decisions in terms of the family. I mean, the Queen is someone who doesn't like confrontation. She doesn't like difficult family discussions. And she always sort of deputized, Philip to do those things. He didn't always make the right decisions. I mean, Prince Charles's, unfortunately, his schooling was Philip's decision. Philip went to this very tough, very Spartan boarding school in Scotland, Gordonston, and he wanted Prince Charles to do the same. It turned out to be absolutely the wrong school for Prince Charles, because Prince Charles is actually, a culture-loving, sort of rather more, aesthete kind of a guy, not at all like his father, who was way more sort of tough and way more sort of, just a kind of the kind of a man who was very different to Charles, very, very different. And Charles absolutely hated it and had a terrible time at school. And they had a very difficult relationship. They were very different from one another. You know, they were two such different people. Charles much more sort of romantic and sentimental and sort of more interested in arts and architecture and all of these things. And, you know, Prince Philip, that wasn't where he was interested. He was much more interested in science, technology, very interested actually in interfaith issues. He had a passion for conservation, which he very much did pass on to Prince Charles, who now has this great leadership role in preserving the environment. So he had a lot of different activities and hobbies. Also played polo brilliantly, rode brilliantly, shot brilliantly. He used to loved carriage driving, where he sat on a boxcar on a coach and fours, and right up to the age of 97, he was photographed riding this boxcar. And he was a man of enormous, very individual, very great character. He was just the opposite of a sort of consort, if I use that word. He was a consort, of course, and the best there has ever been, but he had his own individual passions and his own individual areas. He also was enormously productive. I mean, he chaired, I think it was over 800 charities. He started the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, where young people were encouraged to work in the community, go on intrepid expeditions. It's so successful. It's now, I think, in 44 countries. So he was very, enormously creative in his philanthropy work, and he was determined to carve out areas which would be his. And he did them exceedingly well.
What an amazing life he's led, and an enormous ally for the Queen, who will be dearly missed. Tina Brown, thank you so much for joining us and for your insight.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.